Welcome back to Client's Corner, your favorite place to get your news, knowledge, and action, anything from TV, movies, sports, books, and everyday life. Today, we're here with the Screentime Consultant Emily Cherkin. Not only has she been on the TV shows such as Good Morning America and The Today Show to talk about her work as a Screentime consultant, but she also has written a book called The Screentime Solution, a judgment-free guide to becoming a tech intentional family that comes out in January. Emily, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me, Jake.
Yes, we much appreciate you coming on. So, you were a middle school teacher for a while, and then you went to go help kids with learning disabilities, help them organize their life and their stuff. And then was there a specific incident or that went on or experience that you had that went, okay, this, screen time usage needs to be talked about more?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in some ways, it started when I was a classroom teacher because the beginning of my teaching career, which was in 2003, like I taught seventh grade and none of my students had phones. Social media didn't exist. I get students with like flip phone, like one kid would have a flip phone, but they'd be totally embarrassed because their mom made them take it. It was like super awkward. And then by the time I left the classroom 12 years later, it was like the opposite was true. It was like 95% of my students had smartphones. Social media had really entered the scene. Of course, initially it was Facebook, and you know, kids aren't on Facebook today. That's like what grandparents do now. But it was just eye-opening to me how many kids were coming into the classroom and saying, "Oh my God, see this, I didn't get invited to this party and I was left out of this thing." And so it was it was an aha moment to realize like, I can't not talk about this as teachers and as a teacher. And one of the things that happened at the same time was then screen use for school. Like teachers were being asked to do online grading and online homework assigning. And that was sort of like happening at the same time. So it made me realize that there needed to be a bigger conversation about it.
So when grading went, when teachers started doing grading online, you went from, okay, this is a problem to this is now more of an issue, kind of a way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
it was the same time that I was being asked to do it as a teacher that I was also seeing that social media and smartphone use for kids happening. Like it kind of came at the same time. And I didn't like, as a teacher, I didn't like grading online because what would happen is the kids would go and look online for their grades instead of come and talk to me. And I felt like the skill that I wanted a middle schooler to have was ask me a question, come and have a conversation with me, help me figure out why I got to be on my vocab test, right? And instead, they go online and their parents would email me. And so then it became like now I'm dealing with the kids instead of the kids. And I thought it was important to deal with the kids.
definitely. When did you take that first big leap to be like, okay, this is definitely something I want to go into for sure. Like 100%. I'm going to devote my time and effort into, talking
Yeah.
about awareness.
Like as a business.
Yeah.
Oh no. Are you there? Sorry.
Yes.
Got a little
There.
glitchy. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I noticed, well, part of it was I just, excuse me, part of it was I started talking to my students about what was happening online at home because they kept coming in and talking about it during the day. And then the aha moment actually was when my students were like, yeah, but Emily, our parents are texting and driving. Our parents are playing Candy Crush. Our parents are on Facebook all the time. And I was like, oh, this isn't a kid problem. This is an adult problem that's affecting kids. And so I thought, I have to talk to parents. So I started doing kind of some of that. And then when I switched to working with kids with executive function challenges and ADHD, I realized again, I'm still working with the kids, but it's the parents that need to know this information. And that was when I realized like I like speaking to parents, I like doing presentations. So I launched the business. And the beginning, I was spending 90% of my time was on presenting to schools, like doing parent education type things.
What was your main message when you first started out and has it changed since then?
That's a great question. I think initially I felt like I was talking at my students, like kind of telling the kids, like, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't be mean online. And what's changed for me is realizing, again, A, that it's an adult problem affecting kids, not a kid problem, and B, learning about persuasive design and the fact that social media, especially, but lots of things on the internet and gaming and our phones themselves are designed to be addictive and they're designed to hold our attention. And that to me, I always say it's not a fair fight. So, you're not fighting your kid, you're fighting a hijacked neural pathway. Like you're fighting a dopamine hit. And no parent, the best parent in the world, can't compete with the dopamine hit. So that was really like, that's where I emphasize a lot more now for parents is like, you have to understand that. This isn't your kid being bad. This isn't your kid being weak will. This is which is pretty evil.
Yeah, I remember I was I forgot what specific topic was for on a TED talk that I watched, but the person was saying that when we look at our phones or even just distract ourselves in general, like when we literally distract ourselves from what we're doing, we get a dopamine rush in our head that goes through and it's a thrill.
Exactly.
So what? So
Exactly. Yeah.
screen time. Do you think you say it's lots of it's like neurological, it's a dopamine rush, but how much do you think kind of has to do with kids being bored or lack of attention or lack of patience?
That's a great question too. I always say to parents, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And I think a lot of parents are guilty of being very distracted by their own devices. And, I my generation, and I'm 45, like we grew up, we didn't have internet when I was growing up. Like my first experience with the internet was in high school. And I didn't get even a dumb phone until college or after college, really. So I had a very different childhood experience. And I would say parents in my generation are in a really tricky spot because we remember what that childhood without it was like. But then, like, as adults, we've come into it and we can't live without it. And then you've got millennials having kids now, and they kind of grew up with it at younger, like, having it in middle school or high school. And so, what we're going to see is a generation growing up that only ever knows a world with the internet and social media and phones. And I feel like parents, one of the things I do when I work with parents is I start with addressing parent screen use. Like you can't talk to your kids about screen time and setting limits and putting things away if you're not willing to look at your own screen use. And parents are, I mean, we're really bad, right? Like I don't, like I said, it's not our fault, but we're not off the hook either.
Yeah, def parents should definitely hold accountability for themselves as well if they're teaching it upon their
Yeah.
children. Now
Yeah.
I want to go into COVID because COVID and COVID-19 and
Yeah.
screen time are pretty much, or being online are pretty much synonymous with one another. How much did, I mean, obviously it was an increase, but how much did the COVID affect screen time and amongst, different ages, like elderly, adults, young adults, teens, and children, and what were different and what were the same on
Yeah.
those effects?
Yeah, I mean, COVID added fuel to the fire. Like I started my business before COVID, right? Like this was an issue I was dealing with before we went into lockdown and online learning and online work. The problem was suddenly we were doing it a lot more in a very concentrated way. And one of the analogies I would give is like, it was the lifeboat we needed in that spring of 2020 to stay connected, but a lifeboat isn't long-term housing, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
temporary fix. And so what has happened since is it's much harder to pull back. So whether that's parents who let everything go about rules with screen time when pandemic was happening, like they were like, whatever. And now it's sort of like, it's too hard to pull back. Or things like schools that bought millions and millions of dollars of curriculum and online platforms and laptops for students for remote learning aren't going to stop using it. I mean, taxpayers are going to be furious, right? So then they feel like they have to use it. So that's been probably the hardest part is like, how do you dial back to something that's so compelling? And I think, one of the things too, it's interesting you asked about different age groups, because I do think one of the benefits of this kind of communication is you getting to stay in touch with people who don't live near you, or when you are locked down, like being able to stay in touch with family and friends. But even before COVID, I would say that this is a tool to maintain an existing connection. So, like, I worked with a lot of new parents who had babies during COVID, and the babies had never met the grandparents. And they were like, is it okay to FaceTime with grandparents with this newborn? I was like, of course, because you're building on this relationship, right? Like, eventually you're going to be in person. It's not like, it's not like you're propping up your baby with a camera on 24/7, or at least I hope you're not. But a little bit's okay, and a lot is too much, is what I say a lot of the time. And that's not particularly specific, but yeah, I think the clawing back out of it has been really hard for all of us.
Definitely, there's for sure increase. I mean, I know teachers. This was like right after the year after we did fully online school, but some teachers were just like, yeah, they just turned the curriculum to fully online and never went back into in person because the first 2 weeks of school of 2021 was online, and then
Yeah.
teachers like, we're just gonna do fully online. Which I
Oh,
wasn't. I mean, I would have been nice to go have one in person, but the class is at 8:30 at the same time, so I didn't have to wake up as early. So I did also. It was,
fair.
there's some trade offs for that.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
Another question I want to ask also is how um this is it's related to screen time, but how do you think COVID, and you could even include screen time, how did it stunt maturity between, on young adults and teens and children?
Great question. Yeah. So
I've been very curious about that.
yeah, well, I'm curious what you've noticed too. I feel like what happened was, it is true that over the last several generations, it's not that kids are growing up later, it's that it's just a longer childhood experience, right? So that people aren't necessarily moving out of their parents' house right at 18, or they're not necessarily going to college right away, or they don't get their driver's license right at 16, right? There's these sort of like milestones that historically people hit at certain ages. It's just been an elongated process. So that was true before COVID. But again, the pandemic made that even more extreme. And so, in relationship to screen time and parenting and teaching, one of the things I hear a lot after COVID was, eighth grade teachers would say, I have these students in my class that have eighth grade bodies and eighth grade hormones and eighth grade puberty and all that fun stuff of eighth grade, but their maturity and their emotional skills are like sixth grade level. And I keep hearing about this. And I feel like this is true for all of us. It's like that COVID time warp. It was a couple years, but it almost felt like 5 years. And if you look at like if a kid was 10 when they went into COVID and they spent 2, 3 years in COVID, that's like what, 20% of their life, right? And if I
Yeah.
think about 20% of my life, like we're talking multiple years, right? And so I think it's been hard for kids to kind of just, I think it's been hard for everybody to kind of get back to normal. It's never going to be normal, it's going to be different. But I do think there has been a big, I don't want to imply that it's bad, because I don't know that it is necessarily bad that childhood slowed down, right? I think the problem is our expectations haven't changed. And so kids are, hitting different ages, and we have these expectations of what they should be able to do, but we haven't really equipped them for that, or they don't have the skills that they might have a generation ago. Is that what you've noticed? I'm curious that you're
Yeah,
mentioning.
I've definitely noticed they're more. I haven't really gotten a lot of experience with, kids that, well, certain teenagers have noticed they seem normal for the most part. Some of the maturity was definitely not as what I expected. My maturity is a lot different from when I was 18, but I did
Yeah.
run into an old teacher of mine from Eckstein. She teaches eighth grade language arts and social studies, and I asked her the same question, like, do you see like a lack of maturity, and did COVID stunt their maturity? And she said absolutely. She
Yeah.
was saying that, they're super shy. They don't
Wow.
know how to interact with one another besides, if it's their own friends,
Yes.
they're very to themselves.
Yes. I've heard that from elementary school teachers a lot too, that like these, the thing that we forget or don't always remember as adults is like play in-person free play is how young children, especially children, play is where they learn all of these social skills, right? So, if you're in preschool and someone takes your toy and you get upset, then you have to like figure out, well, oh my gosh, I made somebody cry, or, and maybe you hit them and you learn that hitting isn't the way to, get what you want. And there's all these things that kind of happen. And when we went into lockdown, especially for kids maybe who didn't have siblings or who didn't have much social interaction with other children, we just think of all those little moments throughout childhood that were just not practiced, right? And so I think that for older, like tweens and teens, we see mental health crises, we see severe anxiety, and we see, all kinds of like anxiety related health issues, like not wanting to go out, not wanting to try new things, being really freaked out about what people think of you, right? Body image, social media, all of the ways in which that makes that worse. And the Surgeon General has said that mental health is a teen crisis in America right now, and that is a very big thing to be coming from a very high level government official. And so I don't blame COVID entirely for that, but I do think that experience both showed us how bad things were and made it worse.
Definitely. And COVID and mental health were, I mean, also synonymous with one another for sure. Just being inside can make you really depressed. And, the fear of missing out, like FOMO, that also messes
Yeah.
with your mental health. How does we talk about COVID a little later as well, but I want to talk about how does screen time affect intrapersonal relationships, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of the problem. I think that the default for many, and I am including adults, like this isn't just children, but the phubbing, do you know the word phubbing, which is phone plus snubbing? So when you're talking to someone and they do this, and you immediately know they're not listening to you because they're looking at their phone. We've all experienced that. We've probably even done it to other people, but that's a huge behavioral thing that's become pretty accepted, that people just sort of, what I do is I just stop talking. Like I just wait because I know that the person isn't hearing me. And, it's one thing when it's adult to adult, but when it's an adult to a child, like that's the part where it gets pretty harmful or could be pretty harmful because, if a child is trying to get a parent's attention and the parent is completely absorbed in their device, the kid's going to work harder to get your attention, and working harder as a kid to get attention means your behavior is going to deteriorate, right? That's when they get
Mm-hmm.
obnoxious and yell and hit and be generally not pleasant to be around. And I can't blame them, right? Like they're working hard, they're fighting your dopamine hijack, right? Like that's not a fair fight for the kid either. So I think it's had a lot of negative impact. I mean, I think the antidote to all of this excessive screen time is in relationships. And I mean IRL. I mean the ones where devices aren't present, where we're connecting with people in real time. That doesn't mean these can't be tools that we use sometimes, or, that we, again, I'm not an absolutist about this, but I think it's caused a lot of damage. And I think a lot of young people rely heavily on texting and DMing to communicate when there's problems.
You called it phubbing? No,
Phubbing, yeah, like
phubbing. Yeah,
phone and snubbing.
I'll do that to my friends where they'll be on their phone. I'm talking to them. I'm not trying to call out my specific one male friend, but yeah, they'll be on their phone. I'm talking to them, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, did you pay me? Can you Venmo me that $20 back, or just
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that?" And I mean, like 80% of the time they'll be like, "Wait, what?" And then like 20% they'll be like, "Yeah, I got you next." And then I'm like, "Oh, really? Sweet." Or I'll just say something completely out of pocket and some just see
yeah,
what they say.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And when I was teaching, I had a student tell me that like this is one of those first moments where I'm like, I have to talk to adults, because this kid was like, when my mom's so distracted by her phone, I just ask her for money and she gives it to me and doesn't even know that she's done it. Like I was like, this isn't healthy.
yeah,
Like, oh man.
absolutely. talking about, I want you to kind of not self-critique yourself, but what makes you yourself unique? Like, how do you, like, I've seen maybe like once, I've seen another ad for a screen time consultant, but what differentiates yourself from others? What makes you unique?
Such a good question and a really good marketing thing that I've been working on because I have to set myself apart from other people. And one of the things I'm really proud of is that I don't take money and I don't do affiliates or endorsements for anything. And a lot of people in my field will do like affiliate links, like, and there's a bunch of these sort of like kid version smartphones like Gab Wireless and Bark, and there's several different brands out there, and they'll have like promo codes, right? Like if you buy it through with my promo code, you get 20% off. And I fundamentally cannot swallow that pill because I just feel like it's not in alignment with my values. And I'm not interested in, I mean, I believe that I am entitled to be paid for the work I do, but I don't want it to become that. I don't want to be beholden to a company. I get asked a lot to review apps, or like people will be like, oh, we're building this app for kids and there's no ads, like, would you look at it and endorse it? And it's like, well, I'm glad there are no ads and I'm glad you're thinking about better tech for kids, but I fundamentally, for example, don't think 0 to 3 year olds need an app, right? Like this is
Hmm.
just where we differ. So that's one way. The other thing I do is that I have kept it pretty separate, but I am merging the two a lot more now. Is I do a lot of activism. So I've filed lawsuits. I'm part of a national working group, meeting with the Department of Education. We've filed complaints with the DOE. Like I really do try to walk my walk in addition to talk my talk. Like that's another thing that I think is really unique about what I do. And I try not to make a secret of the fact that I'm married to someone who works in the tech industry. That's not a secret, right? Like that is true. And I don't try to hide that. And I don't try to hide the fact that I have it all figured out. My kids, we fight about screen time, like, but I'm human. And I think that that makes it, I want to be approachable as a parent. And so I think being genuine about my own struggles is important when I'm teaching others.
Yeah, I like that. One other thing I meant to ask earlier was if you were going to rank the social media apps, like let's
Ugh.
say Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, can even throw Be Real on there. Could you rank them on, let's see, categorize them like worst for screen time? And if you can rank them, why are some worse than others?
Oh, I mean, if we're ranking from the bottom, like what's the worst to the least worst? Because none of
Hmm.
them are good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say TikTok is the worst. And part of that is one, it's not a US owned company, it's a Chinese owned company. And so without sounding like I'm a, conspiracy theorist with freaky paranoid delusional thoughts, it's like the US military has put warnings out about national security things because of TikTok. So like it's not just me saying this. Like it's definitely not safe. And the version that children in China use is not the same as the children in the US. The
Oh,
other thing about
interesting.
TikTok, yeah, it's way more quote unquote educational. Like and they have time limits on the ages of kids that can use it. Like they regulate it in a very different way. So basically they're sending their digital cocaine to American children and they're using the like celery version, like the healthy one. Not that I think it's healthy to be on TikTok for hours, but that's a huge problem. TikTok also uses, I mean, their algorithms are super problematic. The fact that it's this short, bite sized, like quick dopamine hits makes it even harder to get off. And it's very entertaining, right? So it's like this perfect storm of, just drive the kids on it and keep, and adults too, right? We're not free from this. So TikTok's the worst in that sense. I think they're all bad. By the way, I include YouTube as a social media
Yeah,
platform. It is
they got
almost,
they got the YouTube Shorts now
uh-oh.
too.
Oh, are you there?
There you go. Yeah,
Well, right. YouTube Shorts is just their version of TikTok, right? And
yeah.
Instagram's got Reels. It's the fact that they copy each other is because it works, right? Like they're
Hmm.
all fighting for a finite amount of our attention. We only have 24 hours in a day. And it's always shocking to me. Like if I look, I had a reel kind of go viral, and oh, Are you there?
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. You said you had a
Oh,
reel, your
I heard you.
reel going viral.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the things that's been so interesting is you can look at hours played. And it's just mind boggling to me that like a 10-second video could have something like 1,500 hours of play. Like, who's like total time?
Hold on. I seen it
Did
seems
you
to be
lose
lagging.
me?
Yeah, this is bad timing for maybe it's something saying we shouldn't do this because of the screen time usage. Would you mind repeating
That's
the
right.
the the reel you said that went what that went viral?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was talking about how I was going to see if I can pull it up easily. I had a reel that got 500,000 views, which is
Wow,
pretty
that's a
high.
lot. That's
It's a lot. And it's making noises on me right now. But one of the things that it tells you is like hours played, like watch time. And if it's got 500,000 views, the total watch time is 1,578 hours. And we're talking about an 11-second video. And to me, that's just mind boggling.
repeat that number. How many minutes?
So it's an 11-second
Second
video,
video.
and the total watch time, so over 500 and something thousand views, has totaled 1,578 hours of view time,
That
which is
and
crazy.
that's your video or different or
That's my 10-second video has had that many plays and that many total hours played, like 1,500 hours played. That's
that
just
that's
crazy to me, right?
that's
And there's
wild.
nothing, it's not even a video that's gone viral, like, the things that come back
Yeah,
and every few months. It's not that. It's just, so
it's not a dance
that's
video.
no. And I think that's one of the things that kids are chasing fame now. They want to go viral. They want to be influencers. They want to be YouTube stars.
Have you ever seen I can't remember what the name. It was a video of a girl and I think she was like 13 years old and she's like doing her makeup and she's just have you seen that? And she's just like a total mean girl, just like
No.
gossiping and everything and just being like a total mean girl. And then on the other side of her doing it, some like the person who reposted was like, "Thank God I didn't have a smartphone when I was in
Yeah.
middle school." Like the
Yeah.
the the 12-year-old girl, she's just ruthless, like going off
Yeah.
while doing
Yeah.
her makeup in front of the camera, and it's just so funny because it's true. I mean, it when I drive home past Eckstein, the kids have like the latest iPhone, and I mean, I think I got my first iPhone in eighth grade. So I had an iPhone in middle school, but my first phone was the sliding up keyboard,
Yeah.
and I thought
Yeah.
I was the coolest person in the world. But yeah, so
Well, I
yeah.
have a kid at Eckstein and she's in sixth grade and does not have a phone. And
Hmm.
right now that's working for us. But it comes up and, she has me as her mom. So we talk about this all the time. She knows my opinions on this, but it's, the reel that I'm talking about that went viral was really about, I said on it, save a tween, share a phone, because that's what we do. She uses my phone number to give to her friends. She texts from my phone. She texts from our home iPad. So she has contact, and she recently wanted to be real. And I said, okay, well, let's do it together. So now she's
Hmm.
got it on the iPad and the phone, and I can see it if I want. And trust me, it's just mostly inane and I don't want to see it because it's so ridiculous. But by doing it together, we're kind of experiencing like, okay, well, what's this like? Why is it asking you to post right now? It's trying to get your attention. So, I mean, that's the way I think it works best to work with the kids who are going to start dabbling in it.
I don't know if have you seen. I recommend talking about B Real. The SNL makes fun of B Real. I don't know if you've seen that skit.
No. Okay, I'm
It's
gonna look.
with oh my gosh, why am I blank on his name? He was in the new Top Gun. He was in the Fantastic Four. Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I'll
Um,
look it up. Okay.
it was with Why can't
Not
uh
Pete Davidson, is it?
no, it was Pete. I think it was Pete Davidson, or I can't remember if he was in it, but it was with
Mikey Day?
Miles Teller. Yeah, Miles Teller and Mikey Day. They
Miles
were in
Teller.
it.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
very funny. It's
Okay,
like
I'll have to look
they're
that
it's like they're robbing a bank. They're robbing a bank, and the guy's like, hold up, we gotta stop. I gotta do my be real." He's like, what are you doing? Like, we're robbing a bank here. Like, we gotta go. It's yeah, along those lines. It was
up.
pretty funny. Okay, so you talked about so if we're gonna like break it down, it's really those short, like those reels. I don't know what Facebook calls them. The reels, the TikToks, the
Uh,
YouTube shorts.
the
But that's what
stories. Yeah.
it's just like the short set. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Like I've been times where I've been on. I don't have a TikTok because I'd have a feeling I would just get addicted to it. Not I mean addicted, but like get stuck on it because
Oh yeah.
it was last week I watched like one Instagram reel and then it was like 30 minutes later and I caught myself. I'm like, what just happened? Because it's
Exactly.
it's like those algorithms that you talk about. They will literally and they'll even listen to me. Like sometimes I'll joke and be like, "Yeah, I want this new cologne," or "I want to go to Vegas," or just stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll literally see targeted ads, and I'll just be like, "It's
Good.
ridiculous." So
Good.
yeah, some screen time is definitely a huge problem that needs to be talked about. And I'm glad you're doing it. Could you do what are like your go-to tips on helping people of all any
Yeah.
age reduce their screen time?
Yeah. Well, my favorite one, which has to do with phubbing, because we were talking about phone snubbing, is to live your life out loud, which is what it sounds like. It's just narrate what you do as you do it. So it's like, I'm reaching for my phone. I'm going to look up and see what time I have to be at this thing. And then I'm going to check Google Maps to find out what the traffic is. And then I'm going to just check into social media and see if I have any DMs. Narrate it like out loud constantly. And I always tell parents, like, no, you do this first. You don't ask your kids to do it till you've done it so
Mm.
much that your kids are rolling their eyes at you, right? Like, then you know they're listening.
You're like, I know, mom. I do it
Exactly.
too.
Exactly. And what we want is for our kids to say, you didn't tell me what you were doing. You didn't live your life out loud. Because like to the back of our phone, our kid has no idea what we're doing. I mean, we could be doing any number of things. And so that's huge. I mean, there's so many benefits. It's good to tell kids what they're doing. It's good to hold us accountable. It's good for executive function, like how we use it as a tool. It's good for talking about how it makes us feel. Like I might say, gosh, I was bored and I opened up Instagram and I was looking at a funny reel and all of a sudden I've spent 30 minutes looking at reels and I don't feel any better. Like giving the kids the idea that this is hard for all of us. And then my husband, Ben, and I, like, if he's said that he goes to work and he notices when people don't do it, and he'll be like, live your life out loud. Why aren't you telling me what you're doing? So once you start doing it, you notice that no one else is doing it. And it becomes like, how is this okay? We're just like doing this all the time around other people. It feels rude, when you start to sort of call it out that way. But it
Hmm.
starts with us. That's a big tip. That is definitely what it. The other thing I would say is get your phone out of your bedroom. If your phone is your alarm clock, get an alarm clock. Like the number one easiest place, I mean, anecdotally, I don't know what the research says. It's like if it's by your bed, you're gonna look at it. You're
Yeah,
gonna scroll before
absolutely.
bed. You're gonna text people before bed. You're gonna doom read the news. Nothing good happens on the internet before bed, right? Like it's just not good. So, people always say, oh, it's my alarm clock, or what if there's an emergency? Well, put it in the hallway outside your bedroom at least. You can turn the volume up, but if you physically can just reach for it without moving yourself out of bed, not good, not healthy. And sleep is the low hanging fruit. If you want to change something in your life, start by increasing and improving the quality of your sleep. And that starts by getting your phone out of your Those are
Hmm.
two things. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely been in sports where I mean, at some points I'll have days, mornings where I'll purposely wake up like 20 minutes before the time I usually do, just in case I'll be like, oh yeah, I might go on my phone I'll get distracted for like 10 minutes because
Yeah. So you build
I
in the time.
see, luckily I've been putting, do not disturb on. So I'm not
Yeah.
seeing the first thing, that pops up. I have to, turn it off to see what my notifications are. So
Yeah.
that's definitely been more helpful. And also doing, what's the screen time or what's
Yeah.
the or downtime, I
Yeah.
think it's called. Yeah.
Uh huh. Yeah.
Uh,
Good.
so yeah,
That's
that's
great.
been helpful for me personally. Um,
Good. That's
what's
great.
can I ask you what's your average screen time?
Oh, let's do a real time moment of humility because I know it's not good.
Yeah,
In part because I use my phone for work so much. So,
let's check.
oh, what's your daily average?
Oh gosh, I don't want to. It's definitely a lot of sports for sure.
You
A
know,
lot.
mine right now is 3 hours and 54 minutes. So I'm owning that publicly.
That is pretty good. Let's see. I'm at 6 hours and 28 minutes. A lot of it is because I like to fall asleep to shows just like as a white noise machine.
Yeah, yeah,
So that helps. Or yeah, but it's um
yeah. Oh, it's a good
definitely
point. I
pretty
like
high.
that it breaks. Mine is I spend 2.5 hours a day texting, but I just remember because I share with Sylvie, some of that's her time because she's texting from my phone. So I can blame her for part of that. But it's true. I mean, it really it adds up and it's definitely this is a great way to look at it. Parents ask me all the time about like parental controls, like what would you recommend? And I'm kind of sassy about it. I say I don't recommend parental controls. I recommend parenting because every parent I work with says
Mic drop right there.
exactly. But every parent I work with says my kid found the workaround. I mean, come on, Jake, when you were younger, did you find workarounds from your rules that parents set for you?
Yeah, 100%.
Because you were a kid and you were smart and you were savvy and that is literally what it is to be a kid. Are there some kids who follow the rules? Yeah, I mean I was kind of a rule follower, shocker, I'm sure, but I'm not a dummy. I know that my kids are going to try to find a different way, and Sylvie does it all the time. I mean I know I got to keep an eye on that one, right? And
Yeah.
so rather than force her underground by trying to set all these restrictions, I'm going to have it above ground. We're talking about it all the time. We're talking about why we have the limits. We're talking, I mean, I'll walk by when she's with her friends, and some of her friends have phones, some have Apple Watches, some don't have any. And I'll be like, don't forget there's porn on there. Like if don't let creepy people talk to you. Like if somebody wants a picture of you, don't send it. I mean, literally, I'm that mom, like walking by saying this stuff to them. But it's got to be there. We got to be talking about it.
And talking about, stuff like porn, that's one of the things you like to emphasize that I've read in the past is that like you'll be on Instagram and then there'll be some like OnlyFans or some
Yeah,
adult like X-rated influencer on like the your next reel or the
exactly.
shorts or yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and it's. I always say to parents, it's not a matter of if your kid sees porn; it's when. I mean,
mm-hmm.
they're going to see it if they're using an internet connected device. Period. And so the question is, do they know what to do when that happens? Have you talked to them about how to handle it? And will they come to you? That's the most important thing. Is like if you have a kid who won't come to you or is going to like be secretive, that's when we get into real big problems, right? Where we get into predators and sextortion and all that awful stuff that's doesn't affect every kid, but it's a thing, it's a real thing parents need to be aware of.
How would you for some, I mean, all the screen time, the usage thing is easily said and done. But with kids, with like ADHD, like for me
Yeah,
personally, I think it's I kind of need like some stimulation or something to keep me like I'll need that distraction. And maybe that's just me personally with my ADHD, or maybe that's the same for everyone. But how what have you seen? How do you what do you suggest for kids that struggle with, or even parents and everyone that
yeah,
struggle with it more than others?
that's a great question. Again, the beauty of ADHD is the deep dive ability, right? That your brain can hyper focus on one thing at a time. And I see that as a superpower. Not always like the work system and the school system do. But the problem, first, it's great that you observe that about yourself. Like knowing yourself is the first sort of solution, right? To figuring out is this a good
Mm.
choice or not. And it sounds like you've put in tools and strategies to kind of help you put boundaries around it. But because we know these things are dopamine machines and we know the ADHD brain loves the dopamine, it can be a very toxic combination. Now, you have almost a fully formed brain because that usually doesn't happen until we're well into our 20s or even 30s, right? But we're talking about with little children, this is where I get really worried. I don't think young children, let me rephrase that. If your child has ADHD and your child is having very big meltdowns, tantrums, behavioral issues related to getting off a screen or when screen time ends or not getting it, then I do think there is something about needing to say this isn't working right now because your brain's not ready to handle it. Now, as adults, theoretically, we can make those choices a little bit more intentionally, but and it's not a one size fits all. That's the problem, right? There are some kids who can handle it. There's some kids who can self-regulate. But first of all, just developmentally, no kid can self-regulate emotionally, before
Mm-hmm.
teen years, even beyond, right? So I think I think it's false of us to think that any kid can handle it. I think for kids with ADHD, it's often much more challenging. And I hear, interestingly, mostly from parents of kids with neurodiversity, usually ADHD, because it is just so intensified. Like everything just is turned up a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I
You
don't, yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I never really realized. I mean, I've had ADHD since, diagnosed when I was third grade. And I
Yeah.
like that you mentioned that deep dive ability to focus on one thing. Because when I was at Western, I would go to these study rooms that was just all white walls and put my phone, my backpack, and then just literally do work for
Amazing.
eight,
Yeah.
7 hours, 7 to 11. One time, the longest it did was 11 and a half hours on finals, just grinding on work. So yeah, I guess that's interesting. I didn't really know that about ADHD then.
Yeah.
And I guess that was kind of the stimulation, was to just like literally focus on that and nothing
Yeah.
else and just keep working
Right.
hard. So yeah, that
That's
actually
awesome.
makes a lot of sense now. So
But
not
also,
to
you set yourself up for success by doing that. By going to a room with no other distractions allowed you, like, you set up the environment to deep dive. And, like, to me, that's just such a perfect example of somebody who understands their own brain and what you need to be successful. And so, like, working with kids with ADHD then is helping them know, like, some kids like having music playing when they study, other kids absolutely cannot do it, right? Like little things like that, like knowing what it is that helps you be most successful in that moment. So good job. I'm impressed.
Thank you. Yes, it was funny because I was not studious at all in high school. But I
But
always say
studious is different from smart, right? Like that's
that's
the other
true.
thing. Like it's not, that's the thing that makes me crazy about public education or modern education, really, because private schools do it too. But a lot of it's just so achievement oriented and directed towards one type of brain, one type of learner. And plus, when you're a teenager, you just don't know yourself as well, right? Like,
Absolutely, 100%.
yeah,
Yeah, and also you just don't feel as motivated, and because you don't know yourself. I mean, I went to North Seattle because I was like, I don't know what I want to do, so just gonna stay home and
yeah,
work and save money. And then when I got
that's so
to,
smart. I think that's so smart.
and
Yeah.
yeah, no, a lot more kids are going to the North Seattle and Seattle colleges because of that. Seattle Promising, which is really
Yeah.
smart.
It's so
Really.
smart. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
people downplay the value of community colleges, and that it's so wrong because some of the best educators go there. It's just like a gem in many ways. So I think more kids should do it. I think it's absolutely a smart path if you aren't sure what you want to do. And who knows what teen? I mean, that's the thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Certain schools. I think just like certain schools like Roosevelt I felt set such high expectations for kids. Like
Hmm.
it was always just like succeed, succeed, succeed versus, other schools maybe handled kids with, learning disabilities better. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes, it was I always felt like I had to succeed. Like I always had to be the best, but I struggled
Mhm.
with being the best. And I felt like that
Yeah.
some teachers or the schools didn't know how to handle it. And I think, wasn't that one of the reasons why in 20 was it fall of 2022 a bunch of the teachers went on strike because
There was, but money related to, salary. But
mm-hmm,
it is true that teachers are getting increased numbers of kids with special. I mean, special ed is such a broad term because like gifted education falls into special ed, right? And you could have
mm-hmm,
kids nonverbal falls into, an ADHD. So the problem is, as a teacher, if I have 30 kids in my class and 10 of them have IEPs or some sort of a learning need, that's like 20 students plus 10 others and 10 unique different situations of how to approach it. And that's just a huge ask of a teacher, right? Even the best teacher is going to feel overwhelmed by that. So needing more support for teachers is absolutely imperative. And, unfortunately, what ends up happening is they teach to the highest need, right? Because it's the most obvious in the moment. But then there's like, 25, 27 other kids in the class who need stuff that aren't getting it. So yeah, I mean, that's a very simplified version of the challenge of schools right now. There's a lot of other issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we leave, let's talk about your book that's coming out in January
Yes, I have a copy.
called The Screen Time Solution, a judgment-free guide to becoming a tech intentional family.
That's
So
right.
tell us more about the book.
Yeah, well, it's you can pre-order it on Amazon actually. I'm on Amazon now. It's been several years in the process of doing it, and actually during COVID I had started pitching to find agents, and that is a whole experience that here's the irony. I kept being told by agents, this is a great book, this is a great topic, I love this, but you don't have 20,000 Instagram followers. And I was like, it's a book about screen time. I don't want to spend time building a 20,000 Instagram following. Like, this is about parenting and, so that was hard because I didn't want to have to do it because of that. So
Mm-hmm.
it ended up actually kind of forcing me to stop, revamp everything. And then I kind of went of more of an independent hybrid publishing option, and they've been great. And yeah, so it's really a guide for parents. The idea is that, this is a solution, that there's solvable things we can do as parents. A lot of what we've talked about today, like we are the role models. We've got to live our lives out loud. We have to talk about this constantly around our kids. This isn't something we can just sort of solve with an app. I always say there is no app for parenting. We are the app. So that's the hope. Yeah. And it's ideally non-judgmental, like come as you are. Parents have messed up. I mean, we're all struggling to be good parents in many ways, and we're not going to always get it right. And hopefully this book helps you feel you're not alone in that struggle.
Yeah, I mean, parenting, I mean, just from seeing it and just being observation, it's a learning process.
100%.
You
I
learn from
know.
your mistakes and what you
Yes.
can, and it's because like you can ask other parents, like, oh, what should I do with my kid? But not every kid, every kid's different.
Exactly. That's it. Even within a family, if you think one thing works for your firstborn and then you try it with your secondborn and you're like, oh, that didn't work at all. It's because they're totally different people. Kids aren't standardized, and that's part of the problem with school, is that it tries to take a standardized system and put kids into it. And I don't think that's actually how most kids learn. I don't think that's actually the best way to approach it. So parenting is a huge trial and error. And I always tell people, like, 80-20. 80% of the time we're going for the parent we want to be in the values that we have. 20% of the time we're going to screw up. And that's
Hmm.
parenting too. That's an opportunity to say to our kids, like, oh man, I messed up. Sorry about that. Let me try again. That's valuable too.
Definitely. Uh, yeah. One other. This is actually just popped in my head. But what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on standardized testing? Do you think they overlook? Because personally, I always thought. I mean, I got less than 1,000 on my SATs, but I'm finished with the 3.75 at Western and an honor student. So like,
exactly.
I just think some kids just suck at taking tests, and
Well, and what a
it's.
standardized test measures is how good you are at taking a standardized test. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't measure it's a slice in time. And what I care about, both as a teacher and as a parent and as a human, is like what kind of a thinker you are. How do you solve problems? How do you communicate with other people? A standardized test doesn't measure that. And one of the problems is standardized testing is becoming very overused tool, especially in public, but again, private uses them too. And it's changed so much that, like, it used to be that we'd have like one every few years, and now it's like multiple a year. I mean, Max is my now 15-year-old. His very first day of kindergarten, he came home and it was like we had to teach him Control Alt Delete his first day of kindergarten so he could log into the district computer to take a test, a standardized test. He didn't even know how to read. And the first thing
What
he had to
the?
learn was Control Alt Delete. So the other problem, to connect this back to screen time, is that standardized testing is now all online.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm sure there are conveniences for that, I get very angry at tech companies who prey on children's data and districts And, you know, I mean, millions and millions of dollars are going from Seattle Public Schools as a district to tech companies to pay for licenses. I mean, it is on average, each school uses 150 different ed tech platforms, 150 per school.
Wow.
There's
Per
no way they
school?
can,
Wow.
yeah.
That's
And there's no
nuts.
way you can monitor that. There's no way you can, you know, look at what they're doing with the data they collect about kids. So a lot of the activism I do is like, first of all, schools, do you know what's happening? Parents aren't giving consent. And these companies are making billions of dollars off of children's data. Well, that doesn't, you know, if schools are struggling financially and they're going to have to close down, like that seems really problematic to me, that these companies are getting rich off of our struggles, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
standardized testing is terrible, is my opinion. And I opt my kids out of it for a lot of it because it makes me angry. And it's, I could go on and on about this, but like now there are these mental health standardized tests too, right? So like both kids I just opted out of, they have to do these online mental health surveys. I am all for mental health. I am all for getting kids what they need. We know there's a crisis, but why are you asking children online about suicide, self-harming, eating disorder? Like, if it's an anonymous test, which they claim it is, what if a kid says I'm suicidal? How are you going to follow up with that? Like, you
Yeah,
can't.
that makes
It's
no
digital.
sense.
So I think there's some huge liabilities there for these companies. And again, who's getting rich off it? That's the part that I get really mad about.
Yeah, this is what made you want to, you started the Student Data Privacy Project.
Yes, you did your homework, Jake. Good
I
job.
did. That's what I like to do.
That's right. Yeah, you go in a white room for 12 hours, you learn everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Now
I
now
did.
it's
That was,
now it's the Northeast Public Library. So if you
I
ever
love
want to,
it. That's
yeah.
my neighborhood. Yeah. It's yeah, that was a part of our activism, was looking at how federal laws do and don't protect student data privacy. And the biggest, I got some stuff coming up in the next few weeks that I'll let you know about as it unfolds, because there's
Yeah.
more activism around this. But definitely one of the problems is parents have no idea, none. And, you know, there's people will say, well, like, well, who cares if Google knows what I'm doing, right? Like, that's boring. Data's boring. But like, for example, there was a school district, I believe it was in Texas, that sold its behavior records, like its student behavior records, to a police department. Why is that problematic? Because what happens then is the police department uses that behavioral data to predict who is going to commit crimes. And we know disproportionately certain populations get pegged as behavioral problems, right? We can talk
Yeah,
about race, we can talk about gender, we can talk about
for
socioeconomic.
sure.
So that's reinforcing then systemic racism, systemic, you know, all sorts of issues. So that's like one example, but magnify that by hundreds of thousands of platforms doing that with hundreds of thousands of data points. And then, you know, we know that these ed tech companies are selling that data to ad tech companies. And those ad tech companies create marketing profiles so that when you go onto your social media, they already know who you are. They already know what products to push to you. And again, as an adult, in theory, you've got that brain who can just say, well, you know, I can tell this is an ad, right? I can tell I'm being, you know, the algorithm's pushing it. If you're 8 years old, you think, wow, how did they know I like this? This is amazing. Or it teaches you what you are supposed to like before you like it, which is one thing if it's like the color pink or, you know, some toy. It's another thing if it's Nazi propaganda, right?
Yeah.
Hate speech, right? Like then you go, oh, this gets dark real fast, right? And that worries me. I think it's a threat to democracy, quite frankly, which is a whole different topic of conversation. But I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah, we'll love to come have you on again
I would
and
love
definitely
to.
talk more about this because like you said, there's so much to talk about when it comes to screen time and privacy and all that
Yeah.
jazz.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Jake. It was super
Yeah,
fun to talk to you.
again, you can get Emily's book coming out in January. Pre-order it now on Amazon. It's called The Screen Time Solution: A Judgment-Free Guide to Becoming a Tech Intentional Family. Emily, pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. Sorry about the whole screen time problem, as you could say.
The
No
irony,
pun intended in that
pun
case,
intended.
actually.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
All
Well,
right.
thank you, Jake.
Yeah, have a good day.
You too.
Great to have Emily on the show. great to have her step in the corner and talk about her advocacy for screen time use and the problem that comes with them. And she is very, very, you can tell that she loves her job and loves teaching people about screen time usage. And also, it was really cool to learn more about how COVID affected screen time because, as I said, they're definitely synonymous with one another. I really enjoyed learning about how it stunted kids and even young adults' maturity, and hearing more about how she feels about some of the education system. I thought that was really important as well. Thanks. This has been Klein's Corner with Jake. Thanks for watching.